All right, so we're gonna call the June 20th meeting of the ad hoc Board of Education Ad Hoc Budget Procedure Committee meeting to order. And in attendance, we have members Jen White and Mike Whitney. And we have attendees Jackie Massett and Tom Olson. First up on the agenda, discussing the charge of the committee. So long story short, the board decided to form this committee in light of some concerns with how the budget procedure was rolled out over the past this past cycle. And so we are going to look at some overarching ideas about how we package the budget and how we present information to the town. Jen, do you or do any of the members want to chime in on discussing the charge, the purpose of this committee? No. Jen, you're muted.
No, just agreeing with your comment that we are going to review the budget process and establish procedures and guidelines and set expectations. So agree with what you had stated.
All right, thank you. Mike, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't. Actually, the formation of the committee predates me, but I do have that same understanding of our charge.
Okay. So the other agenda items, basically, when I set up this agenda, I was looking at two components. One was the actual physical presentation of the budget, as well as like how that's prepared. That's agenda item number 3, and just looking at the format and what sort of content we want in there. And then number 4 is going to be looking at or just identifying possible policies, procedures, or practices that we may want to look into further as far as developing or enhancing or crafting. So for number 3, and just to be clear, I was kind of envisioning tonight as just being sort of a broad strokes meeting, just to kind of hit some general concepts. And then I was going to with the next meeting, I was going to kind of put together some documents that we could put up on the screen to look at, like flow charts or templates for a presentation. But loosely speaking, as far as agenda item number 3, as I said in past meetings, I think the way the town of Groton constructs its budget on the town side, as far as having the table of contents and having each department have its own section that's fully broken out, so I'd like to kind of follow that format. And that's what the document I was going to work on between now and the next meeting was just a template of like what are a proposed table of contents and sort of how each so if you remember the town budget, there's like a narrative page on one side, usually for each department, and then there's a breakout on another page. And then there's further details, drilling down further, depending on how in depth the department goes. So ideally, like as far as the budget presentation, that's sort of the direction I'd like to see us go in, but I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts. Jen?
Thank you. I do like the town council's format. Did we ever figure out if we could use their system? Is it a matter of just getting, additional licenses? Do you know?
At this time, no, I don't, so,
Because it would be easy enough to, like, if we were able to, and I know there's probably, the prior business manager wanted to go in a different direction, but since this is already on hand, maybe it's something we could just leverage and then at another point in time, look at various options. But anyway, I do agree with the format. Where we are able to drill down, so at the highest level, present our budget, have a statement as to what each category is in. It followed or the process and ability to follow the budget is easier than what we have.
agreed. Yeah, so I did reach out to the town and asked if there was like a general, format, like a general, like electronic document that, you know, we could use as a basis that then we could alter to fit what our departments are. They don't have anything because everything's drawn out from their Munis and their other software. So, there's nothing that we would have to look into. We have to make that decision on the software, as a board first before we could really commit to that. You know, I don't think we can actually we can't use their software unless we buy in a license, was the last conversation I remember having. And so we haven't made that decision yet as a board. But I'm just thinking in general as like as a format, we could start kind of doing a thumbnail sketch of what we want it to look like. And then when we actually decide the software, then we can kind of customize, you know, what's produced by that software to match a format similar to this one. But that's, yeah. Mike, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, so, one thing I wanted to say is I know that some of our policy is set up about transfers between, budget functions. And so we'd still need that higher level function oriented, um, that we have. So that's one thing. This is a must for me. Whatever is produced, it's got to be a certain, that should be totally doable. And then three, as far as I guess I got 3 and 4. As far as the municipal side of things, I do find it easier to read through that. However, it doesn't look to me like that's state of the art software. Maybe it is, but the presentation of it definitely has kind of a 1980s feel to it, which I appreciate. But there might be newer options out there that are tailored to education. And then the fourth thing is I found myself wondering what is department level for the schools. So facilities make sense, but would we be thinking of anything with an administrative unit like school by school, or would it be sort of more like functions within the school, special education, things like that? So it has to be something that pairs with the administrative structure, but I feel it would be tough if we were looking through teachers at several different locations in the budget because there are different physical locations in the school system. So those are my musings right now.
Yeah, and I agree with that concern. There is I have some thoughts about maybe Because the way the budget has been presented, the Board of Ed budget has been presented in the past, has been sort of a two modes where there's yeah, everything's kind of lumped together, looking at overall, staff, certified teachers and all that and other departments. And then there's the individualized school breakouts that, we saw this past year. And but the level of detail was a little hard to discern. I think what I was trying to get at as far as like the layout of like per page, I just like, one thing I really like about the way the town does it is that on this one, you can see that there is what was done previously, the previous fiscal year, what was approved and what was adjusted, what was the actual. And then you see what the current or the proposed fiscal year's request was from the department, and then what the manager recommends. So having like a breakout like this, that's something that we did not have this past budget cycle, as far as understanding what the department head initial request was versus what the superintendent or the administration was recommending. And just kind of understanding that difference between the two. Yeah, I think that's valuable. I think as far as like departments go, I could see approaching it in two different ways and having like everything kind of broken out by general category, as far as like, position, administration, and then positions and facilities and some broad strokes. We could do some brainstorming on what departments, or looking at past budgets. And that's where sort of I can envision taking a little bit more time to kind of crunch some to crunch some past budgets and look at the way they broke it out, and then just kind of repackage it a little bit in a way that mimics more what the town has. As far as like just the way it's organized. But then I could also see the value of having a second section of the budget where it's constructed to look at site budgets per facility. So there would be sort of a cross reference where you could see like all the teachers in one lump sum on from the administration's perspective, but then you could see like in section 2, you would see all the site budgets per school or per building. Something like that. And it'd be the same information, just packaged differently. So if you wanted to look at a, site by site lens, you could, or if you wanted to look at the broad strokes lens, you could do that too.
My recollection of the education budget book is that it does have those positions per school and things like that. But then when it gets down to that stage, I don't remember if they actually have the budget numbers associated with that anymore. Like you kind of have to go back and forth quite a bit,
Right.
To try and track that. And I do like that idea of having a knowledge of last year, actual and everything. Like you say, some of the parts do, maybe, and some of them don't. And I'll also say on the town side, a lot of the departments are pretty small in terms of people, and those ones were always much easier to follow. The next biggest to education, which is still much smaller, is public safety, and and that was harder to parse through than some of the other departments, just because of the size. So some of this might be a question on the education book.
And we lost you there a little bit. You were kind of breaking up some. Do you mind restating your last couple sentences?
I think I'm back, but
Yes.
it might be a question of scale. Like the education budget and number of employees is way larger than any town department. And so, but that said, there's still room for improvement on formatting of the education book and the information that's included.
Got it. So what I think we could do just to, move forward, and I got a sense from both of you on that is I'd like to, take a little time and just throw together like a Word document. I'm sorry, Jen, is your hand up new? Do you have another comment?
Yes.
Okay,
New.
go ahead.
Yes. In addition to those columns that you had mentioned, like that the town council had, I would like to add in prior year actuals so that we could do sort of like a trending. And I think it's easy enough to get the consolidated view and then the school view. I think that's easy to do going forward. So I don't think it would be too hard for them.
Yeah,
If
agreed.
that's okay. Like, we can walk through it. Because then
Yeah.
this way we'll have the prior year actual, current year budget. Depending, we could have like the forecast or the adjusted budget, and then superintendent budget before it becomes ours.
Right.
So
Yeah, so I think maybe a way to move forward is just put together like I'm sorry, Jen, were you done? Are you all set?
yeah, I'm trying to like remove my raised hand. Yes.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, so I can throw together a mock-up in just in a Word format. Just to kind of get something on paper that we could all look at, and then we could start moving things around. Which we could do, I could just project it up on the screen and we could edit it live, in the next meeting, and just kind of, get a look at like what it could actually look like as far as using the table of contents and using like a mock-up of, the cost center page and the narrative page. And then, looking at the old budgets too, as far as like do a mock-up of like the site budgets per school. So if everyone's okay with that, is that agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good for me too. And we could even ask the superintendent if there's, not groups, departments that she'd like to see
Right.
arranged. And
Yeah, so I can send out an email to ask, for a list, and I'll also cross-reference to the past Board of Ed budgets to get a sense of how to just kind of like carry what they organized already forward, but in a different format. They'll take their categories, but just repackage them so they present more like what we're talking about. All right, so if I feel like we're good with number 3, and we can move on to agenda item number 4. Identify and discuss possible policies, procedures, and practices related to planning, preparation, presentation, and oversight of the board's budget that may be relevant. So this could be an opportunity to kind of recap a number of the things that we already identified in some previous meetings, as far as policies or procedures that we'd want to kind of firm up or establish. So I'll open the floor.
Oop.
Yes, Jen?
I'm thinking that we can start earlier so that we're not in January. I haven't quite decided on the timeline yet, but if between the 3 of us, we can come up where by the time January comes into play, we've done most evaluation, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm sort of thinking, like pushing it up, I guess. I don't know when they started last year, or like if Susan needs to start earlier so that she can give it earlier. So that's the piece that I don't know, because it was my very first, well, it was your first year too, but I felt like it was.
We're
They
losing you there.
changed the formats like,
No.
oh, I don't know if it's because they changed the format slightly where they did all of those presentations, but maybe we can have the presentations for the, I don't know, the new board. Actually, it's not an election year, right? So like all of us are pretty much on play, so we don't need the presentations, right?
Correct,
I
yeah.
think that's what caused the delay, because we spent much of December going through the presentations, and I'm just trying to find a way so that it was very valuable, but not eat up on financial review time.
Sorry about that.
Nope, we're good.
Yeah, so agreed. Yeah, the timeline felt very compressed, and the presentations were kind of, so I'll make a note of that. And you know, again, I'll kind of get this all typed up, and then we can look at it again at the next meeting, and you know, kind of category look at each one, and see how we can move the ball forward with each one after we do our brainstorm tonight.
Thing is, like, business will be prepared to line items, not say like, oh, I'll get back to you, and then we're supposed to read it through board notes when maybe it's almost, if we're discussing, let's say we review it by school, that the business manager would be able to discuss what's in there so that we're not wasting time. That's one of the things that I would like as well.
Agreed, yes, that sounds good. Some of the first part of that comment was a little chopped up with the signal. But
Sorry.
you came back in clear talking about how, you know, we're kind of stuck in this loop of the I'll get back to you comment. And so you were saying you want to, what was your suggestion as far as like trying to focus more on?
So yeah, so let's say we're reviewing Fitch and Groton Middle
Mhm.
that evening, that the business manager is prepared to tell us everything that's in that budget. We did not get that this year. So if we ask how many teachers does this represent, hopefully it's part of the document and we don't need to ask that, but being able to go through all of the line items for the school that we're discussing, if we're reviewing it by school.
Right.
It was getting very tedious. Always like, oh, I'll get back to you. And then we would have to wait like 2 to 3 days for them to get back to us.
Right. Yep. And that sort of ties into one of the points I wanted to make as far as like the frequently asked questions document. You know, a lot of information got loaded into that, but we never actually reviewed it collectively. We were kind of expected to go and seek it out on our own. And then if we wanted follow-ups, we could bring it up at some point, but it was never like a organized effort to kind of go through those questions.
No.
So
I
having better.
guess.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess what we were missing was transparency. I didn't feel like we had that in some of the line items.
Right. Yeah, so having better preparation for site by site or department by department questions and answers on the night of.
Correct.
All right. Mike, anything from you?
Yes, so I agree. Having the information in a timely manner is very important. And also, I was thinking in terms of the budget process, it should be more or less cut and dry to be able to come up with a level services budget as a benchmark. It's, I think, just as important, if not more so, than comparing it to the previous year's budget. You're bringing that forward with whatever escalated or decreased costs are associated with it. So level services budget benchmark would be great. And then if they have the budget that's different from that in particular areas, that's where a narrative would be very helpful, because there could be two layers of narrative. One, it's higher than the previous years in this category because of, negotiated contractual increases, for instance. And then if there's something else like beyond level services, we're adding a special education personnel because of the increased need for this reason, or new mandate from the state, something like that. So that our starting point, we have to refer to the prior year, but another benchmark, useful benchmark, is the level services budget as well. And then the other thing in terms of process, I was thinking, I really like, in terms of when the board considers policy, we have this first reading, second reading procedure built in. And what I watched last year, maybe it was because of time constraint, is that you met on a certain budget section, and people said, well, we really need this, should consider this, can we reduce this? And those notes were taken into account. And then at the end, the superintendent came back with a revised budget to vote on. And I felt like it missed that sort of section by section second look at it that the first and second reading has. Or we could do it like the town council does, where, committee of the whole, you're meeting on one section, you're going through it, debating, and then the committee of the whole votes on a number then, instead of a whole budget number,
Right.
which is then voted later. So those are, I'm not wedded to either one of those, but just there needs to be, I think, more like an in-between step there, rather than discussing it, giving feedback, and then having to vote on the entire budget, which is what seemed to happen last year from me watching the meetings.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, actually, that's a great point. That correlates with something that I had written down as well. Basically, I was saying, and I made the comment too back in during the deliberations of, when are we going to vote on these things? And I was expecting to go into that session similar to the way that the town council and the RTM handle the town budget, where it's like department by department, and then there's deliberation and there's a vote, numbers are adjusted, and then you move on to the next section. So, yeah, I'm definitely in favor of trying to take that approach. Because it's really hard to track when you have like, I guess a compounded number at the end. Like, we were given these object codes that were, combined and recombined, and things are moved around, but not always exactly where we were asking for them to go. So I think it'd be a little bit more organized and targeted and more efficient to just go similar to the way the town council and the RTM do, which, section by section. Anything else off the top of the head?
Ian, I just realized that what we could do as a section, I know I'm backtracking to the last topic. We need to have a grant section that was always missing, and it was always going in and out of grants, and I couldn't follow it.
Right, and that reminds me of another thing. One of the questions I asked was about like having the narrative and the financials in a unified report. And the superintendent responded saying that, narratives kind of were created on their own side, and the financials are tracked in a separate report. And I think, having a grant section in the big book where both are there side by side, or even better.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right.
So I've got a thought on the grant too. I like those ideas. I thought it's budget adjacent, but also relevant. Uh, there should just be a grants page, a competitive grants page on the Board of Ed website, the school's website, where you can
Mhm.
just look and it just literally just lists the grant and it says funding agency, title, amount. If there's match, you have the match, and then you just have the project span. If there's a 2-year thing, they have these dates, and you just put them in there. And then, like with a, that might be enough, but you could add like a sentence narrative. And it's the kind of thing where you don't have to remove information from that website. It just the most recent ones are to the top. And so if you start doing this, like say this year, 5 years from now, you'll have this long, long list of grants that have expired and the new ones coming in. I think it'd just be actually it'd be helpful in communicating the type of grants we get and how successful the school system is, and then what these do for it. I mean, I agree we need something specifically in the budget context, but all this information is publicly available. It's just not we're just not advertising it, communicating it to the public effectively, and on the website could really help that. But we do it where I work quite frequently. It's quite helpful, and other organizations do that too.
That's a great point. And that reminds me of, I forget who brought it up during the deliberations, but the idea of as we present the budget. So I like the idea of getting on the website and but also as we put it into the budget, if we're going to present it as part of the big book, to show sort of I guess what, if I remember correctly, again, I'm blanking on who exactly brought up this idea, but showing sort of like the overall amount of money that the school spends on education, including grants. But like having a pie chart that shows like how much taxpayer funding is supporting the schools versus how much grant and other sources are coming in. And I think we've done that a little bit, but I think it'd be good to have, as part of this whole package in a little more articulated fashion.
Agreed, because most of our pie charts like is town, federal, and like it doesn't go into the grants or it doesn't detail out the grants. So yeah, if we could pull that out to say, here's the total budget. This is the amount of the grants. Like if it's a pie chart, whatever it is, show it. This is the federal, and then this is the town portion.
Yeah.
See total perspective, like even if we trend it out in time, if we start from time next year's budget, we could see like federal funds are increasing or the town section is increasing. So even though it's in totality, you can sort of see like what percentage is contributing to the overall funds. And I like that idea for us, and I'm sure like the taxpayers would like to see that too. I would assume they would like to see it. So and in that light, since we're sort of talking about it, maybe have like a section on the revenue page. You know how like every time we're meeting and it's like, oh, we underestimated like the revenue impact and we really should be getting X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
It's sort of showing like the amount by revenue source as well. Like maybe like a chart or something or a whole section on it. I don't really know what I want it to look like yet, but it's almost like having a revenue section
Right.
that's detailed out.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And actually, like, that reminds me, I wanted to emphasize, invite both of you to, if you have a vision of how you want to see information presented, to go ahead and, do a mock-up in, whatever, format, as far as like Word doc or whatever, or Excel, just do a mock-up of whatever you envision, and, we can share that on the screen as well and talk about it. 'Cause that, I think looking at it visually could help, accelerate the process too.
Mm.
And then make adjustments to help clear things up. Anything else, Mike?
No, I'm all set, but in terms of the grants, it also occurred to me that we could sort of have an off budget cycle grant report, or a meeting. Yeah, it'd probably be a summertime meeting,
Right.
actually, separately on that.
Well, that's a great segue into looking at sort of what the oversight of the budget, which basically would be like sort of doing like a tracking, like our monthly reports that we get. Pretty much every regular meeting, we have the business manager give a finance report. And with the interim business manager, he's repackaged some of the information in ways that seem to help clarify some things. And so I'd be interested to hear ideas on like what how better to track the budget's development throughout the year, so that if there is something trending towards positive or negative, we can catch it earlier.
So, when we get our reports, right, like it's always like at a consolidated level. When we do the budget, I'm thinking we need to have, once we develop the overall budget, and maybe just at the highest level, not at the school level, we can have the budget divided by 12 or seasonalized, obviously, so that we can see, we pretty much know salaries, so we know how much is going to come in, right? So that's pretty easy. And then whenever their merit or step increases come in, we can put in the 2-3%. So then we know going forward, so that when we start getting the monthly reports, they could give us the consolidated number, but then they can also give us like, hey, this is what the budget had planned for the month of November. These are November actuals, and you could see the variances in the month. And then on a year-to-date basis, how we're tracking. So this, I feel, is it will make them more accountable. And if looking at, so we know that electricity, let's say a presumption that it's going to winter time, because we need to now pay for whatever. So then we can trend it so that this way we can see, hey, you're really high in electricity in this month compared to what you had planned for. Why? And they will have actuals to look at, right? So they could sort of use like prior actuals as like a seasonality going forward, and in time they will get better. So I would like to have them like do it by month so that we can get our reports by month seasonalized.
Thank you for that. I concur. I think that's, having, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying having like the monthly reports, so have like a running tracker of like what we approved, like where we should be in the year based on the approved / estimated budget versus what's actually happening.
Correct. Because you have a better chance of, your seasonality might be off, but you have a better chance of seeing it rather than looking at it from a consolidated perspective.
Right. Having it broken out like parallel to the way it was broken out in
the budget.
In the big budget.
Yes.
Okay.
So we need to make sure when we approve or recommend a budget that it's not only at the total amount, but also by month or by quarter, by month, whatever it may be.
Got it. By quarter or month. All right, Mike, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I really like that idea, and then I think Jenna may have brought up in the one of our last meetings, also having an actual narrative statement along with that. So, for instance, that one pager budget breakdown that we've been working on recently, it had like 70 items in it, but there were probably like 5 or 6 or 7 categories, main categories. And so for each of those 6 or 7 categories, if there could be a accompanying page that says, okay, hey, this is up because of overtime, or this is down because we got a deal on this, et cetera, or this is on track for what we see. Just to force to have like not just data, but an interpretation of the data that's on paper. It doesn't have to be detailed, just some kind of characterization. And we'd have the understanding that as we get quarter by quarter through the year, that we'd have a better feel, like it'd be more certain and less uncertain.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I like both of those. I mean, yeah, I like the whole idea with both of those integrated. I don't have anything necessarily to add on top of that, because that pretty much covers what I was thinking. And yeah, so having like the well, here's a question. Do we think there's any sort of value in, I can understand having like the broad categories, and then like a month by month timeline of the broad categories as far as like electricity and or utilities, and all the other stuff, salaries and benefits, claims. Would there be any value in having a site by site monthly tracker as far as like what was estimated for the usage of the year? And then is that something that could be valuable, or would that be just maybe too onerous to put on the principals and vice principals of each site?
It's my sense that the principals and vice principals really only have control of their site budget and
Right.
approval of overtime. So I don't know if that factors in or not, but we're probably hearing most of the information from the business manager and the superintendent, assistant superintendent.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on what software we get, and how dynamic it is. If we are just gonna utilize, the town one, like Mike had mentioned in the beginning, I don't think it's as dynamic. But if the software we have, or be more dynamic, then it's something that we can consider. What we could do as a stopgap is, like you had mentioned, salaries we pick certain categories that they can control, right? We could do staffing, salary, overtime, and maybe transportation. And then we hold Sam accountable for the like as an overall topic, electricity. I think like we pick like the 5 top categories that they can control and manage. But I wouldn't put everything on them, because I think part of it is allocated to them, and so they have no control over that.
Right. And yeah, they do need, on the ground judgment calls, some wiggle room. Well, you mentioned software again, and that kind of brings me back to thinking that, the way I read and understand the charge of this committee and, the fact that we're looking at preparation, presentation, format, content, a lot of this does overlap heavily with the, what software we're end up using. So, my thought was to reach out to the interim business manager, and I have the notes from back from the previous business manager as far as like what certain software that he recommended as possible candidates to consider. But I think that it's within our purview as a committee to at least develop some sort of dossier to further expand the pros and cons of each software that's been mentioned, and do a little bit of a search on that to try to bring a recommendation to the board. Thoughts on that?
I'm okay with it. Because if we're gonna make a recommendation on how to prepare, develop the budget, we need the tools. Similar to like what we went with the literacy program. We respected the committee and their review and their diligence. And maybe we just ask our peers on the board. But I think that's something that we could do, and then we can present the benefits of maybe the 3 or 4 that we looked at, and then make a recommendation to the board.
Mike, thoughts?
I think it's a good exercise. I also think it's software choice is a very good question to ask during the business manager interviews. And I know we have some candidates, but I think that position is still open until June 30th, to apply to. So I'm not sure about the timing of that, but it'd be great if you get someone in who's already conversant with whatever system we'd want, and we'd find that useful. So.
Understood. Yeah, I'm not sure where we stand with the search for the new business manager, but I think in the meantime, like just using the interim as a resource just to start gathering information could be a viable path just to keep the ball moving down the field. So, all right. Well, that's I'm kind of I think we got some good things to work on for next time. One other, let's see. Well, there was some talk about the idea of historically there's been some amount of money, and it was emphasized earlier this year that was rolled over from the previous school year. Early on in the budget process, there was some reconciliation that had to be done from the previous school year, which I think I would be interested in taking a hard look at what practices or procedure or policies we could put into place that would prevent that from happening in the future. Seeing as how, based on previous conversations in meetings, it was identified that it was a past practice that had occurred, but it's now been declared to not be a thing that we can rely on, which, I would not have wanted to rely on it anyway. you know, I think there's value in having a clean break from one fiscal year to another. But one thought I had was like, yeah, taking a look through our policies and procedures and seeing if there's something that we can do to ensure that, you know, we are not, that we can prevent a rollover type situation in the future. But then again, like that may be kind of a circular conversation, because if we get the oversight and all the other things in place, then chances are we won't find ourselves getting caught short at a time where there's not much time left to make adjustments. So that may be a thing we just have to kind of put on the shelf for now and see where everything else leads us first.
So as you know, I harp on this like all the time because I don't think it was in place, but now I think it's in place, and or at least Ray's trying to put it in place. And I'm just making presumption because I have not looked at their books, and I don't want to, because then that's stepping out of our swim lane and can potentially put us in a bad situation. But we can ask the questions, right? So by us, if we develop the budget monthly or seasonalized, and then as we're tracking actuals, we will have a better and clearer view of like, hey, you estimated X for transportation and we're at Y. They could tell us like, oh yes, we have X number of POs out, and it hasn't been realized yet. So as part of the monthly, this is stepping away a little bit from our budget process, but it's so that the budget process will hopefully help us get better reporting, is that when we're going through it monthly and reviewing it monthly, we can better and clearly identify where we are starting to fall behind or be over. And we can always ask to have them create a policy and procedure, or desktop procedure, as he was trying to tell me during that meeting. And we can ask to see what their desktop procedure is, what controls do they have in place. I don't think maybe we need to do it as a board, but they need to have it as an operational guideline. That's how I'm sort of thinking about it.
Got it. Mike?
I've got nothing to add on that one. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Jen. I think that's a good nuanced approach to the situation, focusing on the monthly reports and the getting a better sense of like a running tally of what's been encumbered and what's been actually shifted from encumbrance to expenditure. Right. And then how that matches up with what we estimated the timeline to be. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think we have some good notes here to process. So if there's nothing further on number 4, I'm ready to move on to number 5 and look at the date for the next meeting.
So, as I mentioned to you when you're trying to set this meeting up, we're going to be away from the 26th to the 5th, but I don't mind meeting because it's like, even though we're going to be away at night, we usually don't do anything anyway, and I can like call in. So if you want to do a Zoom meeting, again, I'm more than willing to join, like even though we're going to be out.
Gotcha. Mike, what's your schedule look like?
Definitely not around the first week of July. And then other than that, I'm kind of more or less available, and Zoom would be the way to go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I was kind of hoping not to do anything not to have a meeting between over the next week and the week after, just because I wanted to take a little time to kind of develop the mock-ups so that we could have something to project and really take a look at And based on the notes that, we've got from here, I gotta review the meeting and pull some more notes out. So I like to kind of be able to take my time with that. So I'd be fine with looking at, let's see, mid-July. Take a look at the calendar here.
Seems like Thursday worked, so whatever like Thursday is, maybe like the second or third week in July. What I'm gonna do is probably take our budget from this year and try to mock up and use fake numbers, of course, for formatting, and I'll make sure I send it to both of you.
All right, sounds good, yeah, and whatever I get mocked up, I'll send around as well. Shall we say the 11th, July 11th, just as a tentative for now? And if something changes, we can shift to the week after that if needed.
I think that works for me. At least it does at this point.
And
Yeah.
6:30, is that a good time for everybody still?
Yes.
All right,
Yes,
gotcha.
I'm even willing to go to 6 if you want, so to gain like more time if you think it's gonna take longer next time around.
No, well, the reason I'm leaning towards 6:30 is because I will have I'm picking up a little bit of work on the side as well, so I might be having some obligations that take me up to about 5:30 on a daily
Okay.
basis.
Yep, no, that's fair.
Yeah. So, yes, I just have a little bit of buffer time there. All right. I guess that's about it then. We're set for the next date. And so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I
All right.
second.
Mike. There you go.
Any opposed? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And obviously none opposed, none abstained. We are all set. All right,
Perfect.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a
you
good-
very much. Have a
all
good
right,
day.
take care. You too.
Night. Bye.